Hey everybody, Jason here with the Landlord Launch. I want to welcome you back to our course on fair housing. We are jumping in this week with the reasonable accommodation and modifications section of our fair housing course here. So let's jump right in and start taking a look at some of the things that we need to watch out for on the RAs and modifications and service animals and all that fun stuff. Okay, so this is kind of getting back to that Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988. This is where the first kind of like significant expansion of the law occurred, since its inception. And again, it was expanded to address the accommodations and modifications components for disabled individuals, handicapped individuals. This also affected the design and construction requirements. Again, we're not going to get much into that, but this is where a lot of that came into being. And then, of course, this is where we also talk about our assistance animals, which ultimately we treat like any other reasonable accommodation. And we're going to touch on it in this section this week, this component of the video, the course, but we're going to have a separate kind of more in-depth workshop on assistance animals and ESAs, because it is a more confusing subject, and it's something that we are dealing with a lot more at this point in time. So I wanted to dive in a little deeper on those subjects, but we are going to touch on it here. Okay, so let's talk about the definition of disability according to the Fair Housing Act. It's any physical or mental condition that substantially impairs a major life activity. So this can be walking, this can be breathing, this is caring for yourself. Hoarders are kind of covered in this because that's a pretty serious issue. It's another one of those things that we as landlords are starting to deal a lot more with these days, and we should be a little more careful about how we approach hoarders and the whole epidemic of hoarding, because you can get yourself into some fair housing trouble there, discrimination trouble. Seeing, thinking, autism, MS, asthma, seizures, PTSD, and alcoholics and addicts that are in active recovery. Those are considered people. Those fall into the definition of disability, which is a protected class. So be very aware of those types of things when you run across them. Okay, reasonable accommodation. So a reasonable accommodation is basically when a tenant or an applicant makes a request to have an alteration to a rule, a policy, a procedure, something along those lines. A modification is something a little different. This really, the accommodation, reasonable accommodations deals with rules and policies and processes, and what it's doing is giving an exception so that they're able to enjoy the dwelling and work around the issue that they're dealing with, the accommodation. So a couple things on that is, first off, the person that is making the request must have a disability. Somebody can't come in out of like a relative or whatever else unless they're like a representative, like a caretaker, but it can't be the husband of a sister think it'd be a good idea if we make a change this rule so they can have a dog. Nothing like that. The person making the request has to have a disability. One thing to be careful about is that you really can't inquire much about the details of the disability, hardly, well, actually anything at all. There are some steps to take, which we get into and again in that workshop for ESAs, but there are some reasonable accommodation request steps that you can take that kind of keep you out of stumbling into issues there. Another thing to remember is that on reasonable accommodations, you must consider every single request, even if it's completely unreasonable right out of the gate. You go through the same process, you consider it, you give it the amount of time that you need to, you put in the effort if where you can, and then you make a determination on how you're going to proceed with that request. Now, that also means you do not have to grant the request every time. So if, let's just say that you have somebody and they say, I need you to extend the quiet times for the property, the community, say an apartment community, say if they have a rule that says, quiet times between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. And they say, well, noise really bothers me and I have anxiety, so you need to extend the quiet times to 24 hours a day to accommodate me. That's not reasonable. That's not a reasonable request. You can't do that without disturbing everybody else. It would majorly impair your operations. So you can deny based on something like that. And there are a couple things you can ask yourself. Does that request impose an undue financial burden? And would making that accommodation require a fundamental change in operations, like we just got done talking about? If the answer to is yes on either of those, you can deny that request. Although I would highly recommend that if you are going to deny a reasonable accommodation request, that you have somebody with a legal background take a look at it first, your attorney, just to make sure that you are covered and that you're not doing anything that you're not intending to do. Because if you make a mistake here, it can really cause you some pain. Okay, now reasonable modifications. If accommodations are about rules and processes, modifications are more about the physical change to the building, an apartment, a home, a community, that will allow them to enjoy the premises, to use the premises. Now, we're not talking about things like, installing an exterior elevators because they want to live on the third floor when you have first floors available. Again, there are some limits, but we are talking about reasonable requests to modify an apartment or a home that will allow that person to enjoy and use the premises. And in a lot of cases, it's not even a bad idea on some of those to leave in place, because it can be a selling point depending on what it is. Now, some of the things here is that these are generally at the expense of the tenant, especially in single-family homes. You can ask them to return it to the original condition of the home. You may require that the tenant pay into an escrow account to ensure that there will be money available to return that unit to the original condition of the home. There's nothing wrong with that. And you may require that they happen with a licensed contractor that you approve. You don't have to let their brother come in and knock the cabinets out and lower the countertop and all that good stuff. If a licensed contractor comes in and makes those adjustments, great, as long as, again, they can return it back to the original condition of the home. Now, on apartment buildings and some buildings built after a certain date, this gets a little more complicated. Common areas, certain public areas, hallways, things along those lines. A lot of times that actually falls on the landlord, and especially if the building is built after a certain date, or if they kind of do a renovation that pulls them out of kind of a grandfathered status, they may be required to bring that up and also be responsible for those things in the future. Because, again, back to what we were talking about earlier with the way it affects construction and architects and things along those lines, certain requirements, building requirements these days that would account for this stuff just as a general state of it being built. It would be built like this normally if it was being built today. So got to watch out for that. And if you're unsure, again, seek advice on this stuff, because violating one of these things can cause you a lot more headaches and a lot more money than the couple $100s that you would spend at an attorney to verify what you can and can't do. Okay, so here we go. We're touching on the assistance animals and ESAs, which is one of the hot topics of being a landlord today. There's a lot of abuse of this out there. It's in a lot of our faces. A lot of us don't know how to really to deal with this. Again, I have a workshop that we're going to jump into this separately outside of this module, but I do want to touch on it still. So first off, know that ESAs are basically just a reasonable accommodation request. They're asking you to make a change in your rules. One, if you don't accept animals, they're asking you to make a change to that rule to accept this animal, which is an ESA, or a certain breed or a certain weight, or you can't charge deposits, for example, and you can't charge pet rents, for example. Those are all rules and policies and procedures, that if let's say you have a 2-pet maximum and they have 2 pets, and then they need an ESA, which is a third animal. It happens. I've seen it. You have to consider it. It's a reasonable accommodation, and as long as they have the proper documentation, then you have to prove it and move on. So there are, when we talk about assistance animals, that's kind of the overarching header column, for lack of better words, that encompasses all the different things like in the ADA and the FHA that revolve around animals and making exceptions and reasonable accommodations. The first one's therapy animals. Now, therapy animals, actually, they're included, they're talked about, but they really don't have any protections. Now, these are going to be the animals you see at an airport, the ones that go to the hospitals, the ones that provide comfort to, children in a hospital or seniors at a nursing home, things along those lines. And they're just really good animals that are trained, and they're good with people, and usually the owner is a volunteer of some sort or another. They don't have the same protections and the same privileges as service dogs or emotional support animals. They can't go in all the same public areas like a service dog can. You can't automatically take them on an airplane because they're a therapy animal, things along those lines. Service dogs, they enjoy the most protections. These are your the highly trained animals, seeing eye animals, that are trained to perform specific tasks to help a person with a disability live life a little easier. They are allowed anywhere that a person can go. So any public place that a person can go, airplane, train, courtroom, it doesn't matter. Service dogs, restaurant, service dogs are allowed to go. ESAs, which is they do not have any special training requirements. There are, a few pieces of documentation that you have to obtain to actually be qualified for an ESA and get a reasonable accommodation. But you don't automatically get to take them on airplanes, which a lot of people think you do. A lot of people equate emotional support animals to service dogs, and it's not the same thing. They don't have the same protections. They can't go to the same places. They are just basically an animal, a companion animal, that you are allowed to have with you in a housing living situation if you meet the requirements of it. You don't get to take them everywhere just because they're an ESA. And I can't remember if I touch on this later, but the ESA online certificates and training authorizations and all that stuff, those are all scams. It doesn't matter. There's a very specific letter that you're looking for, an ESA letter from a licensed mental health provider of some sort or another that is familiar with that person's issue that they're working with and has prescribed that animal to help them deal and cope with that issue. Again, we will really dive into that on the workshop. So when you are dealing with an assistance animal, it's important to remember that they are not pets. And matter of fact, I am really trying to get myself in a habit after 25 years of calling animals pets, really trying to use a verbiage of just calling them animals. And even the paperwork I'm using these days, it's not a pet lease, it's an animal agreement, things along those lines. I'm trying to get myself out of the habit of that just because it kind of helps me, kind of keep things in line. I don't know, maybe it's just a weird quirk for me. So yeah, they are not pets. They are considered medical devices at the point that they become an ESA or a service dog. And again, you process them as a reasonable accommodation request because that's what it is. They are asking you to make a change in your rules so that they can have that animal live with them. Okay, make sure to check out that. That should be the next, depending on, I like to keep these about 45 minutes. So the next 1 or 2 modules after this, you will see that very specific ESA Assistance Animals workshop that will be included in this. Make sure to watch that. It's very helpful. A lot of great information in there. Moving on, familial status, which is another one of the expansions of the 1988 Amendments Act. Okay, so familial status is basically any parent, any person, legal person, somebody that has custody of somebody that has a kid under the age of 18. You cannot discriminate against somebody that has a kid under the age of 18, generally speaking. This also includes people who are pregnant or in the process of securing legal custody of a minor, and we'll get into some examples of this. This really kind of jumps in when we're talking about occupancy limits and how you set those things up. You cannot evict someone who becomes pregnant. And a while back when I was doing some research along familial status, it wasn't all that long ago where it was a very common practice, and this is one of the reasons it was included in that 1988 Amendments Act, but it wasn't uncommon at all to see for rent signs, no children allowed, things along those lines, and it ended up causing like a housing epidemic for families, especially on like affordable housing apartments, things along those lines. So, and they would have real situations of, a young family or whoever, a family would get pregnant, they were living in a one bedroom or there was no children allowed there, and they would end up getting evicted if the landlord found out. So these were put into place for a reason. These are actually fairly recent examples. This is not like it's from 60, 70, 80 years ago. This stuff has happened, in my lifetime for sure. Okay, so again, this is really a lot of times HUD looks at your occupancy standards, and a lot of times when these things are brought up, it has to do with steering, or it has to do with how many people can live in a home and being denied housing based on that type of deal. Let's see here. Oh, rules come into place too. So yeah, especially in apartment communities. So rules and restrictions you got to be careful of. So again, you can't restrict children or those with children to certain areas of the property. Again, steering, you can't live on the top floor because you have kids and you will disturb the neighbors below you. That is a no-no. You can't make rules specifically against children, like children can't swim in the swimming pool. Children can't be in the laundry room, something along those lines. Of course, obviously, you can't advertise with no children. You can't have a no children place, with the exception, of course, like we talked about before, the senior housing exception. That is actually, again, carved out to provide a community where senior citizens can enjoy a community that do not have children running around and disturbing them. Okay, again, watch out for safety-related rules. Remember, you are not the parent, even if you don't agree with how they are doing it. You can't put rules in place to kind of correct that behavior preemptively. Now, if this says rules are okay from a higher authority, now what that really means is, think about a gym. If the manufacturer of a piece of gym equipment says, do not use if under 12. I don't know, something along those lines. That's not coming from you. That's not you making a restrictive rule. That is a rule that is put in place by the manufacturer of that equipment, saying that it is not safe for a child under 12 to use that. That is an okay rule to have, but you're not the one making it. So rules of higher authority are okay. And again, rules that discriminate against children in general, and you'll see some examples of how we can kind of just quickly tell if those happen. There's a little substitution rule, I think is what it's called, or what I call it. And then again, a lot of times you're usually dealing, when it comes to these types of issues with children and safety rules and stuff, you're usually dealing with multi-unit dwellings, duplexes, triplexes, small apartment communities, and so on. Single-family homes, usually not the case, but it's more of an issue. Well, because single-family homes, you don't have common areas, you don't have pools, you don't have parks, you don't have playgrounds, so the rural component isn't near as prevalent there. Here's that kind of substitution rule. If you're ever unsure about whether or not the rule is not a good idea, is just use a different protected class in whatever you're trying to do. So again, think about if you were to try to set a rule, no children outside after 8 p.m. You substitute that out with another protected class, you're going to know real quick if it passes the smell test. In this example, no Latinos outside after 8 p.m. That would not work. Again, no children in the laundry room, nobody in a wheelchair in the laundry room. I mean, it just, it makes no sense. And if it doesn't make no sense, if it doesn't, I mean, you could, there's an argument to say no children in a laundry room is a safety deal, but you can say something like no unsupervised children, or children must be supervised by a parent. That would be okay because it's a safety issue, but you can't just say no children in a safety room or in a laundry room, sorry. And there you go. Children must be supervised at all times by their parents. That would be extremely tough. I think that's one of those violation rules. Again, substituted out. People with autism must be supervised at all times by their parents. That is a clear and cut case of discrimination against somebody with a disability. Can't do it. This is a clear and cut case example of discriminating against a child, which would be a violation of the familial status. So be extremely careful there. Again, going back to that senior housing, we did touch on this earlier, and you can make an exception if you are running senior housing. You have your 55 plus communities. Again, at least one person in a household has to be 55 years or older. In general, the owner must maintain 80% or more of the units at 55 years or older. Now, again, these are kind of like the basics. Depending on the financing, depending on the program, depending on the states and all that stuff, there's usually layers on top of this, especially when you start getting the tax credits and the home programs and the HUD-sponsored programs and all of these different things. A lot of rules are usually layered on top of that. So, I mean, like with the 62-plus communities, a great example is like one HUD community I was familiar with. It was 62 and over, but you could rent to a certain percentage of your units if they are 55 and older, if they had a disability, and if they were under a certain percentage of income. Then that was the exception there. So again, that wasn't the basics of the 62 plus community, but that absolutely was, the extra financing, the extra rules that applied based on the program they're on, added those extra layers of rules on there. So again, if you're a single family homeowner, you're probably not dealing with this type of stuff, but it's good to know because, heck, maybe one of these days you'll want to get into senior housing. It is very profitable, very profitable. Okay, let's talk about what happens if somebody files a complaint, what the investigation process looks like, what, some of the potential penalties and fees, and just what that looks like in general. So basically, anyone that feels they've been discriminated against based on a protected class when it comes to housing can file a complaint. Again, your protected classes: race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, or disability. If you are in a more restrictive city, state, county, income, sexual identity, orientation, criminal history, whatever the additional protected classes are. Now, the thing is, which is kind of a headache for landlords, is that there's no burden of proof requirement to file a complaint. They can just file a complaint and they can make an accusation and they don't have to really provide any proof. It's just, this is what has happened. And it is what it is, but there is no burden of proof requirement for them to file that, which means that if they file, you're just going to have to deal with it, and you're going to have your stuff together to make sure that you can show that even if they actually truly thought that this was a case of discrimination, that, they just didn't have all the facts, hopefully, and that, although it may have looked like this, that's really not what was going on. This was going on. Here's my documentation, which we'll kind of get into as well. So complaints. Complaints are filed with HUD. They can be filed with state agencies, the local housing agencies like, the Human Rights Commission that I dealt with, and tenant advocacy groups. Ultimately, though, it all filters up to HUD. And what state agencies are representative of HUD. The local housing agencies are representative of the state, which are representatives of HUD. Tenant advocacy groups, a lot of times are more nonprofit, separated. Sometimes they get grants, things along those lines. But if an actual complaint is filed, it'll be filed with HUD. Now, the tenant advocacy groups may go out and try to gather evidence and go out and find situations that demonstrate that a landlord is in violation of discrimination, but then ultimately the complaint and the determination will come from HUD on those. So the steps on this: HUD will contact everybody involved. They'll interview. Maybe they'll send testers. Maybe they'll conduct on-site visits. Testers are basically what they'll do is they'll try to set up situations with people of different races or whatever else, and there'll be a control group and a group of protected class, and they'll see if you react differently to one or the other. So, they may send a single white male into a community. If somebody's complaining of steering, saying no children on the top floor, they may send a single white male and no children in. To look at an apartment on the ground floor, they may send a single mother in to look at the same apartment on the ground floor and see how that property manager or how the landlord reacts differently, if there's any difference in the treatment. Now, they do have the authority to take depositions, issue subpoenas, like my local investigator did. She threatened a subpoena, and they can compel testimony or they can compel documents. And again, usually in an investigation, you want to be as cooperative as possible. If you're uncooperative, that's just going to cast suspicion, and it's going to drag it out longer. Now, don't get me wrong. If you want to go get legal representation and make sure to do things the right way, then I'm not discouraging that at all. But don't be difficult just to be difficult. That never is going to turn out well for the landlord. Now, if HUD determines that there is no reasonable cause, that's what they're going to say, that they'll issue it's called a no cause determination, and they're going to close the case. They're going to shut down that complaint, and then they're going to move on. Now, if there is, some feet to the complaint, if they have determined that, hey, maybe there's some things that could have been done better, there may be some discrimination here or so forth, what they will attempt to do first is do a conciliation agreement. And so they'll bring all the parties together, they'll talk about the stuff, you guys will come up with an agreement on what needs to change, what type of policies need to change, what type of training you should take, all of those types of things. And they'll try to get both parties to agree that this was acceptable in terms of a resolution, and then you will sign that agreement, and then HUD will then close the case. But if it's found that if either party breaks the terms of that conciliation agreement, then they can recommend the Department of Justice to file a lawsuit and then enforce that agreement, or go back down the route of pursuing the charge of discrimination. So if that conciliation fails, if they move on with the lawsuit and there is a determination a reasonable cause does exist, then they will move forward with that charge of discrimination. And then there's a couple different things that can happen. One, they can take it in front of a HUD administrative law judge, or either party could say, no, we don't want to do that. We want to go and we want to proceed in federal court and just take it straight into the legal system. Now, which way is better? I couldn't tell you. I have never worked with a HUD administrative law judge. The few that have made it, the very, very few that have made it to court has been in the federal court system. I actually have never personally seen one resolved while I was around. Those things are long and lengthy and cost a lot of money, and usually there's at least a reasonable idea that there is something to be gained from it, or the attorney for the tenant wouldn't keep pushing it, so that ends up becoming more of a drawn out legal case that ends up costing quite a bit of money. If you are found guilty, if that holds up in front of a law judge or the administrative judge, and you are found guilty of discrimination, whatever the charge is, the HUD fees, the fines, the penalties, the first one's $11,000. If you have a second violation within 5 years, then an additional $25,000 will pop on. Third violation in 7 years, $50,000. And then in addition to these, you can also be sued in civil court and face punitive damages, and that's where the big bucks come in, because there are no limits. And some of the case files that I have read on landlords who have lost these civil suits, I've seen $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, $500,000 civil suits, depending on the severity of it. It's not like if you made an accidental error and you're trying to make right by it and the person just wouldn't let it go, that you're going to get nailed with $500,000. These were pretty blatant discrimination. The company's being difficult, and they fought it, and they were being jerks about it and just really drug it out, and it was pretty serious stuff. And they're basically made an example of. But the innocent stuff, the inadvertent, unintentional things along those lines, yeah, it's not going to be pretty. It's going to cost you some money, but I doubt you're going to be getting hit with a $500,000 civil lawsuit. Okay, let's talk about prevention. Best way to deal with this is just to reduce the exposure. And that's why, again, I wanted to deal with fair housing first. It's because by putting a lot of this stuff into place, we can just eliminate most of the exposure right out of the gate. So a couple just general rules. One, don't single out members of protected class. Don't single out anybody. I mean, treat everybody equally. And I know that the golden rule is sometimes challenging to implement in real life, but I mean, if you're going to do something for one person, be prepared to do it for everybody. I mean, if you just follow that, most of the fair housing potential claims, they go right out the window. Make sure to have written policies and then follow them. And written policies that you follow shows that you're treating everybody the same. If, let's just say, a reasonable accommodation request, one of the things I recommend is you have a reasonable accommodation written policy that says when we get a reasonable accommodation request, we're going to do A, we're going to do B, we're going to do C, we're going to do D. When somebody does that, you pull out that written policy and you follow that to the letter, you follow that through, and then if somebody still files a complaint against you, it's very easy to say, well, no, this is our policy, this is what we apply to everybody, this is why we denied this, or whatever the case may be. It's extremely helpful, and if you have your stuff in order like that when an investigator comes to ask you about situations, especially the more professional ones, it really sets you up for success in that. Now, don't say you have this stuff and not use it. They find that out, that's a whole different story, because then you're just basically lying to them and it gets under their skin. But if you are truly sincere and you're using this stuff, you're going to get the benefit of that. The people are going to understand that, okay, maybe the policy's off or whatever, but you're trying to do the right thing. Maybe it's just outdated, maybe something's changed, and it's not going to hit you near as hard. Again, that's where we're talking about being consistent in the application of the policies. If you have a policy and it's written, then use it. Apply it to everybody equally. And then document, keep records, use checklists. And you're going to see this in, the way that, like, when I get inquiries, we'll use a traffic log. When we hand out an application, it's the same application packet to everybody. When we screen somebody, we're going to have we're going to go through all of this as we go through. We're going to use a screening criteria and show everybody how we are going to rate their application. We're going to use a screening checklist and show them the exact steps that we do to verify all the information they put on their application. So it's consistency, it's documentation, it's record keeping. It's showing that we treat everybody the same. We run them through the same process. We didn't deny you because you're a single mother with a child. We denied you because you didn't meet our credit score, you're in bankruptcy, and you only make $500 a month, whatever it is. If those items don't meet our criteria, that's why you're denied, not because you're a part of a protected class. Advertising, marketing, watch out for that. Do not print or publish anything that indicates any preference, limitation, or discrimination based on a protected class. So back to our no children advertising. Be careful with the no Section 8, because in some areas you have to accept Section 8. And if you don't accept Section 8 and you're in one of those areas that has income as a protected class, that's going to be screaming, it's going to be published, it's going to be out there for the world to see that you are discriminating. So just know your laws, know where you're at, and make sure to account for stuff like that. Don't say stuff like perfect house for couples, located by beautiful synagogue. I mean, who is that excluding? Ideal for a young couple, who is that excluding? Just watch out for some of that language and ask those questions. Is that excluding anybody? Use the Equal Opportunity Housing logo on your marketing, some of your other paperwork. There's a logo in the resource section here for you if you want to download it, slap it on your screening criteria, your application, things along those lines. And again, it's just just basically states, especially the poster, we're an equal opportunity housing provider. We don't discriminate based on race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, or national origin. Just some of the recommendations that come from HUD. Okay, some very specific examples of what to watch for to avoid fair housing issues, discrimination, things along those lines. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going into kind of the property management cycle. So just kind of follow along here. The first thing that we really look at in the property management cycle is getting our property out there. So the marketing and advertising side of that. Again, avoid that language that could be perceived as discriminatory. No children allowed, perfect house for couples. Again, located by beautiful synagogue. We're excluding a group of people based on a protected class. You know, what religion are they? You know, their marital status, no children allowed, familial status. There is actually language, and it says here, that could be perceived as discriminatory, but this language is actually pulled right out of HUD literature, one of the guidance literature. And I mean, you can read through this and see obviously where, I mean, just again, use that substitution rule. No mentally ill allowed outside after 8 p.m. on the community. That would be a big no-no. So the thing is that people aren't always that obvious, and a lot of times when they use language, maybe they don't even understand what it's doing. But this is definitely language to avoid, and because again, it identifies and it excludes people that are not that. So think about lovely 2-bedroom bungalow in I don't know, heavily Catholic neighborhood. I mean, I don't know, just pick any of them. That excludes, I mean, maybe of people of Muslim descent, maybe of anybody that are atheists. I mean, who knows? But again, you're excluding, so we want to stay away from that language because it will get you in trouble. Especially stuff like, and watch out for like on the bottom where it says restricted, exclusive, private, integrated, traditional. Those are all keywords too. And these are actually words that HUD will look for in marketing and advertising to determine if there's even a potential. I mean, if they see this type of language in marketing and advertising out there for an apartment community or whatever else, that's a red flag. They'll send testers. They'll just start randomly testing to see if there's any actual discrimination happening, especially if it's on the border. In your leasing practice, respond to people consistently. If people leave a message, respond to everybody. I like to use a traffic log. You'll have one in the resources if you're part of the Landlord Launch. If you're watching this as part of the Landlord Launch program, it's in the Forms Vault. You can just use as an example. I use mine literally as a piece of paper. I fold it up, I stick it under the phone, and every time I get a call that is a leasing potential, an inquiry, I pop it out and I capture information. It does a lot of things for me, but it documents who's calling about the home, when they're calling, and kind of what questions I ask them, because it also has my pre-qual questions on there. So I ask everybody the same thing. I put everybody through the same set of questions. Again, return all calls. Linguistic profiling is one of the tools that will be used to determine if there's a potential of discrimination going on. And what they basically do is they'll have somebody call that has a heavy accent and ask about an apartment, and then they'll have somebody with no accent call and ask about an apartment. So if they get a complaint that says, you know, I was discriminated against because I'm from Central America and they don't want my kind there. Fine, they'll send somebody with a heavy accent, and then somebody, you know, a white male or whatever that doesn't have an accent, and see if there's a different reaction to one or the other. And if there is, they're going to send people in and they're going to start really putting you on the radar. So be careful of those types of things. Make sure to provide consistent information about the availability. If you're going to advertise that 3 units are available, if they show up, there better be 3 units available unless you just rented it. Don't take a look at it and be like, you know, I really don't want them to live over here, so I'll show them this unit, but not this other unit or the other two. If there's 3 units available, let them know, let them decide. You know, again, a great example of this is family with children, top floor. We don't want to disturb the neighbors downstairs. Nope, it's a big no-no. If they're there to see a 2-bedroom, you have 3 2-bedrooms and 1 or 2 of them are on the top floor, then you should tell them what's available, where the locations are, and let them choose. You do not make those decisions for them. That is steering. Provide consistent information and materials to people who are looking at the property. Make sure to give the same tour. If you're on an apartment community, have a tour path that you walk with everybody. Something that walks by the park, then the pool, then the laundry room, and then your model, and then whatever units are potentially available. Whatever it is, make it consistent. You know, give the same material out. So I mentioned the standard rental application packet here and the property flyer, and this is how I kind of use that stuff. In my rental application packet, I have a screening criteria. I have a security deposit policy, which is something we'll get into later. I have a property flyer, and then I also have the actual rental application. The screening criteria is so that everybody knows exactly what I'm going to look for in an application and what can get them denied. I give that information to everybody and apply it to everybody the same. The application, of course, is to collect all that information. The property flyer is actually to, one, give them information that they could take home with them on a marketing side, but it also serves a dual purpose in that if somebody says, well, they told this single white male over here that this apartment was $800 and they were going to charge me $1,400 because I have a child. No, you got the same rental application package as everybody else on the flyer that you received. It was the same price as this single white male or whatever. So it provides the ability to provide consistent information to everybody that comes and looks at it, and it's a great backup and documentation to have when you're trying to make that case. Don't steer. Like I said before, show them what you have, let them decide. Don't say stuff or make the determination it's not a good place for children. You can't live on the top floor because of kids. You may feel more comfortable in this building because there are more people that speak Spanish there. Whatever that is. No, don't do it. It is illegal. It's steering. Again, don't do stuff like I know of one case where somebody actually got charged of discrimination, and what they were doing it was apartment community manager. What they did was that it was a rougher, the demographic was high African American. It was a rough community. It was not a great part of town, and there was somebody that came in that didn't fit that demographic. And what they did is they suggested that they come back through and drive by at night because they feel like it was the right place for them, but they didn't want to say that outright. But just by making that suggestion, they pretty much did anyway. It got out, it came around. They got in trouble and had to go through a whole bunch of stuff. So watch out for stuff like that. That's why that's on there. It's a real situation. Don't give them statistics about the neighborhood. Let them do the research. If somebody says, hey, is this a high crime area? Say, hey, listen, the police department holds stats on all neighborhoods. I would recommend you go check there. I wouldn't want to give you the wrong information. Don't give them stats and be like, oh, no, this is a perfectly safe neighborhood. Of course, never guarantee security, but there's never any crime here, and they move in, there's all kinds of crime. Or whatever. Or if it's the other way around, if there's all kinds of crime or there's not all kinds of crime, but you don't think it's a good place for that person, like, yeah, this is a pretty high crime area. I don't think you'd be a good fit for here. Those get really sketchy really quick. Don't do that stuff. Application screening, again, that rental screening criteria, how much money do you have to make? How much, what's your credit score have to be? What's your criminal record have to be? The same standards for everybody that looks and applies for the home that you're renting. Screening checklist, you're basically going down and it's a documentation. How many occupants do they have? 4? Does that meet my screening criteria? Says that I won't have any more than this many occupants? Yes, it does. Good. Yes, 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 yes. If they meet all criteria, they're approved. If they don't meet all criteria, they're denied. Simple as that. It's not because they were a single mom with a child. It's because they didn't meet A, B, and C of your screening criteria. Here's your checklist. Here's your documentation to back that up. Very consistent. The approval denial letter. That's your proof that you sent out the denial or the approval when it happened. I mean, somebody may come in and say, no, I was only denied because this again, I'll pick on the white male. This white male got it and they wanted to rent to them instead. Actually, no, that you were denied. Here's a letter, just wanted delivered. This white male didn't even come in until 4 days later. Here's their application. You know, I mean, it establishes a timeline and its documentation. Keep all these records for at least 3 years. I actually tell people to find out how long your accountant wants to keep your financial records. And if they say 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, I keep all associated tenant records for the same amount of time, because it'll also help you in audit purposes if there's ever a financial audit of any kind. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, we'll continue on. I normally like to keep these about 45 minutes to an hour. We're about the 45-minute mark right now. I think we've got about 10 more slides, so we're coming towards the end. So I'm going to want to finish it up in this session. The lease agreement and addendums, again, use the same move-in packet for everybody, same terms for everybody. Don't create special addendums for people with children. You know, keep that move-in process. There's a, you know, when we get into the like the move-in process section, I use a move-in checklist for this exact reason, so I can show and demonstrate that I keep things consistent from tenant to tenant. Any rules and enforcement, enforce the rules the same. If you're going to issue a notice to quit for non-payment of rent the day that they're late, make sure you do it every single time they're late for every tenant you ever have. Simple as that. Treat everybody the same. If you are going to give one tenant a violation for noise after 10 o'clock, make sure that every tenant that has noise after 10 o'clock gets that violation. Consistency, documentation, notices. You know, make sure to take action as well, because by doing nothing, that can also indicate that, you know, perhaps you're doing nothing because of a protected class. We don't want to do that. We want to be consistent in everything that we do and document it. Again, we've hit this a couple times already. Watch out for those safety-related rules. You're not the parent. Rules are okay from higher authorities. Use that substitution rule for children, or any other rules that you want to put in place. If it doesn't pass the smell test, don't use it. It's no good. It will get you in trouble. Did I miss that? There we go. Collections and evictions. Again, like we're talking about, if you're going to send your notice to quit on the day that they are late, make sure to do it consistently. Make sure everybody gets the same late fees. Should be built into your process. Don't give different late fees for different people. If you're going to send balance reminders, send them to anybody that's late. Send them in a consistent manner. If you have made the decision that you're going to post your 3-day notice to quit on the 2nd of the month because they're late on rent, and you're going to send them over the attorney on the 7th day of the month if they haven't paid rent by then do that for everybody. Don't do it for the 7th for one person, the 10th for another, and the 15th for another, because then you could be accused of treating people differently based on a potential protected class. Even if that's not what you're doing, it exposes you, and that's what we're trying to do, is eliminate that exposure to those types of claims. Maintenance, again, be consistent. When a maintenance request comes in, document it, put it on a work order, use an electronic version of it so you can show when it actually came in, close it out, show when it was resolved, put comments on there on what you did to resolve it. Make sure to have a policy that, you know, all maintenance orders are going to be done within 24 or 48 hours, so you're going to take action on them and then apply that consistently. If it's an emergency repair, make sure that takes precedence. You know, last thing you want is a plumbing leak, which would damage your property anyway, but for somebody to say, well, he purposely didn't fix my plumbing leak because he doesn't like that I'm a single mom with a kid, or whatever the protected class is. You know, show that, yeah, this is how I handle my work orders. This is what I do. This is my process. When emergency comes in, it gets bumped to the top of the line. This is when it came in. It got bumped to the top of the line. This is what we did to resolve it. All of those things, that documentation and consistency, just eliminate. And again, this happens with my first discrimination complaint. That's what they said, was it was based on maintenance, that I wasn't taking care of maintenance because they are part of a protected class. So it does happen. Retaliation. So let's say that a complaint goes in against you. Do not retaliate. Do not change anything that you're doing. Follow in your processes. Treat them with respect. Be professional. Don't hold on to repairs. Do not harass them. And do not, if you have multiple tenants, like in a multifamily property, don't tell other tenants about it. Keep it very private. If you retaliate, even if the complaint isn't legitimate, you retaliate and somehow or another they capture that on a phone call or can prove it or whatever else, you're done. That's it. I'll tell you right now, even if you have legitimate backup on the other stuff, it's really not going to matter. If you retaliate, then that's just going to add to it, and you're gonna face some consequences on that. So I always say be professional with everybody. Who knows? I mean, this may even turn around and may turn out to be one of the best tenants you ever had. I've seen that type of stuff too, and based on how you treat them at that point in time, it could have been just a complete perception issue on their end, and then once they see the whole picture, they may feel very stupid about the complaint and what they did, and it could be they just don't see all the pieces. Screening's a great example. They may be stuck in their head that single mother, that's why they want me on the top floor. I even told them I was concerned about it, but then if they then find out that no, that's not why, here's the 3 items why you were denied, and it's logical and it makes sense, then okay. I mean, it happens. It happens. Just don't retaliate. Never good. Okay, so wrapping up here, final thoughts here. Again, the best way to deal with this is avoid putting yourself in these fair housing situations in the first place. Build all this stuff into your processes and your procedures. One thing I like to say is do not assume behavior is going to happen. If it does happen, then deal with it, but don't assume it, because that's where we start getting into those restrictive rules and those types of things. Watch your advertising. That's a low-hanging fruit for testers and people that are looking for ways in to start looking at you to see if you are discriminating. That's low-hanging fruit for them to find. Make sure when you're dealing with reasonable accommodations and modifications that you consider all of them. Get that done in writing. Watch the ESA Assistance Animal Workshop. I'm also going to do a specific workshop on reasonable accommodations and modifications. It'll be a short one, but it's literally going to be taking a couple examples and walking through that process, giving you a sample written policy, giving you the reasonable accommodation form, modification form, which we have in the Forms Vault right now if you want it. You can go download that, and then just those steps to where, it's not that complicated. Probably going to be a pretty short video, but at least you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to see a walkthrough on it, and you'll be able to know what to do when those hit you. If you know what to do when it hits you, it's not really a big deal, and it shouldn't scare you. But if you don't know, and you don't know what to do, and you're not sure, and you have questions, then yeah, it can be very intimidating for sure. Whatever rules you have, don't make exceptions to rules. If you make an exception to a rule, be prepared to make it for everybody from that point forward, especially if you're managing multiple properties, own multiple properties, and so on. Be consistent, which we've talked about a lot. Be professional, which we've talked about, especially in retaliation. That also really goes towards retention, getting that lease renewal and so forth. Because like I said, some things can blow up and then calm back down, and misunderstandings, and they could turn out to be the best tenant ever. Maybe they won't be, but at the very least, when it comes to renew that lease, if you acted professionally, they're not going to hold that against you. Even if it was their fault, they could hold that against you just based on the way that you reacted to them. And just be professional. It always pays off more than, throwing a temper tantrum, retaliating, causing them trouble just to cause them trouble, getting them back. It never works out well for the landlord. It just doesn't. Use your forms, use your checklist, build this stuff right into it. And as we go through this, again, I said it a lot of times, the reason I'm doing fair housing now is because I wanted to give you an idea why, as we develop these forms, these checklists, these policies, why we're doing it, because we build all this stuff in. It's not the only reason. These other things they serve other purposes, but if we have our foundation here, it eliminates almost all of our fair housing issues, and it just makes life a lot easier. Again, if you are in a multifamily type setting, don't play favorites, don't have favorite tenants, don't gossip, don't talk to them, don't give them another tenant the perception that somebody's getting favorable treatment over them. Perform that maintenance in a consistent manner, have your policies, follow them, be consistent. And again, like we've been saying, we're going to structure our processes this way as we move forward. As we build out our forms, as you access things, as we build our processes, you're going to see that we're structuring this right into it. And even with the way that we work with people, this is the foundation that's going to keep us out of fair housing trouble. And it is the most basic and easiest way to protect ourselves from lawsuits. Because just because this stuff will protect us from fair housing, it actually eliminates a lot of the other type of suits and liability and things along those lines as well, and a lot of other trouble that we can find ourselves in. Not that it doesn't even have to necessarily be legal trouble, but there's a lot of headaches that landlords face, and having some of this stuff in place will just help us avoid those and make our lives as a landlord a lot more enjoyable and more profitable for sure. Okay, resources. So you'll see links. You saw the others from Avail, Turbo Tenants, Apartments.com. I found some more since then. I'm going to add those. If you are part of the Landlord Launch program, over in the $11 Landlord section of this as well, as I find internet resources like this, I just keep adding to it. So it is very likely by the time you are watching this, will have grown as well. We're going to have access to that fair housing logo, fair housing poster immediately for you, built into this little module. But again, it's all in the Forms Vault. I'm going to include that reasonable accommodation sample policy, the reasonable accommodation, and it's also for modification as well, the request form. That way you can download those, make those your own, especially the policy, to figure out how you're going to approach that type of stuff. Watch our reasonable accommodation modification video, the walkthrough video as well, which will dive into these. I've also included, these are again in the Forms Vault, but I'm going to link them here as well for easy access. This reasonable accommodation quick guide. This is a North Carolina guide, but I thought it did a really good job in terms of outlining reasonable, because a reasonable accommodation request is a reasonable accommodation request. Yeah, maybe there's a state spin on it here and there, but for the most part, this was a very solid information guide. So if you want to check that out, that's there. The Emotional Support Animal Reference Guide is another solid resource for you. Of course, check out that ESA and Animal workshop as well. But I mean, check out the workshop, and then if you ever need refreshing, pull out the guide. If you ever want to do some reading on it, that's easy for you. Pull out the guide. I always say, as a landlord and a property manager, we don't have to know everything. We just need to know where to go to get the information when the time comes. And that's really what a lot of this is about. And then I've included a Fair Housing HUD booklet. This is a booklet that's produced by HUD that kind of goes over all the basics of fair housing. And what I like about this, especially if you get more current versions, it'll talk about the fees, the fines, the investigation process, things along those lines. So it's a great resource to have if you ever have questions about the fair housing, HUD, process, complaints, ADA, things along those lines. And that, my friends, wraps us up for the fair housing section. So we got this done in 2 sittings. We're coming up on an hour on this one. I think it was about 40-45 minutes on the first one. We still have our ESA and Animal workshop. And then, of course, the reasonable accommodation modification walkthrough videos as well. That I will encourage you to watch. Again, if you have any questions, make sure to join us for our weekly Q&A, where I go over any questions that you have live, and then also use the resources in the Landlord Launch, the $11 Landlord program, the Facebook support group. There's a lot of different ways to get the information that you need. Make sure to utilize those. That's why you're here. You're looking for a place to where you can get solid answers when you need them to the issues that you're dealing with. So thank you once again. We'll go on and wrap this up. Thank you once again for watching the entire fair housing series. I hope this has been helpful. And again, I look forward to seeing you in the future modules, the future courses where we start to actually apply some of these things as we move forward. Thank you. Have a good one. See you next time.